A homeless German shepherd was too weak to stand, then a rescue team stepped in. In the shadows of the city's alleys, a German shepherd lay motionless, his once proud form reduced to a skeletal frame. His breath came in shallow gasps, each one a struggle against the pain that consumed him. This was Chance, a name he had yet to receive, but one that would come to define his very existence. Chance's story was one all too common in this unforgiving urban landscape. Born to the streets, he had never known the warmth of a loving home or the comfort of a full belly. His days were spent scrounging for scraps, dodging the kicks of cruel passers-by, and fighting for the meager territory he called his own. But even in this harsh world, Chance had once possessed a certain majesty. His rich, sable coat had gleamed in the sunlight, and his keen, intelligent eyes had sparkled with the promise of a spirit unbroken. He was a survivor, a warrior, a king among the forgotten and discarded. All that had changed when Vincent Crowley and his gang had found him. Vincent, a notorious figure in the city's underground dogfighting scene, had seen in Chance not a living being, but a commodity, a new contender for his vicious blood sport. They had taken Chance, beating him into submission and starving him until his ribs protruded like the bars of a cage. They had thrown him into the fighting pit, expecting him to tear his fellow canines apart for their twisted entertainment. But Chance had refused. Despite the hunger gnawing at his belly and the fear pulsing through his veins, he had turned away from the bait dogs, unwilling to become the monster they wanted him to be. And for that, he had paid the price. Now, as he lay broken and bleeding in the alley, Chance's breaths grew shallower, the light in his eyes dimming with each passing second. He had fought the good fight, but it seemed that his battle was coming to an end. Little did he know that fate, in the form of a compassionate veterinarian and a determined rescue team, was about to intervene. For in this city of shadows, there were still those who believed in the power of hope and the promise of second chances. Dr. Emily Carter had always known that she was meant to heal. From the moment she had first set foot in a veterinary clinic as a wide-eyed volunteer, she had felt a deep, unshakable connection to the animals in her care. Now, as a fully fledged veterinarian, Emily dedicated her life to the well-being of the city's most vulnerable creatures. She was a fixture at the local animal shelter, tirelessly tending to the sick, the injured, and the abandoned. It was there that she had first crossed paths with Paws of Hope, a small but fiercely dedicated rescue organization. Led by the indomitable spirit of its founder, Sarah Thompson, Paws of Hope was a beacon of light in the darkness, a lifeline for the countless animals that society had cast aside. Emily and Sarah had formed an instant bond, united by their shared passion for animal welfare and their unwavering belief in the transformative power of compassion. Together, they had tackled some of the city's most heartbreaking cases, from abused pit bulls to abandoned litters of kittens. But nothing could have prepared them for the sight that greeted them that fateful evening, as they responded to an urgent call about a dog in distress. There, in the depths of the alley, lay Chance, his once mighty form reduced to a mere shadow of itself. Emily's heart clenched as she knelt beside the fallen shepherd, her trained eyes taking in the extent of his injuries. The gashes that crisscrossed his body, the scars that spoke of countless battles fought and lost, the dull, lifeless eyes that had once shone with such fierce intelligence, all of it painted a picture of unimaginable suffering. But even in that moment of despair, Emily saw something else, a flicker of hope, a spark of the indomitable spirit that had kept Chance alive through all the horrors he had endured. And in that instant, she knew that she would move heaven and earth to save him. Sarah, too, felt the pull of that unbreakable bond. As she watched Emily work, gently stabilizing Chance for the journey to the clinic, she knew that this was more than just another rescue. This was the beginning of something bigger, something that would change the lives of not just one dog, but of an entire community. For Sarah knew, with a certainty that came from years of fighting in the trenches of animal welfare, that Chance's story was not an isolated incident. She had seen the signs before, the telltale scars, the haunted eyes, the broken bodies that spoke of unspeakable cruelty. Somewhere out there, in the shadows of the city, a monster was preying on the innocent. And Sarah was determined to stop him, no matter the cost. Vincent Crowley sat in the darkness of his makeshift office, a cruel smile playing across his lips as he counted the night's earnings. The sound of clinking metal and the rustle of bills were music to his ears, a symphony of suffering and greed. To the outside world, Vincent was a ghost, a phantom who moved through the city's underworld with impunity. But to those in the know, he was a king, a ruthless mastermind who had built an empire on the broken backs of the innocent. Dogfighting was Vincent's passion, his lifeblood. He reveled in the power it gave him, the thrill of watching two beasts tear each other apart for his amusement. To him, the dogs were nothing more than tools, expendable commodities to be used and discarded at will. And yet, even in his twisted worldview, Vincent had to acknowledge a certain grudging respect for Chance. The shepherd had been a fighter, a true warrior who had refused to break no matter how much pain they inflicted upon him. In another life, Vincent mused, Chance might have been a champion, a legend of the fighting pits. But in this one, he was just another casualty, another broken toy to be tossed aside. Still, Vincent couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this time. The whispers on the street spoke of a new force rising, a coalition of do-gooders who were starting to poke their noses where they didn't belong. At the center of it all was that meddling veterinarian, Emily Carter, and her band of bleeding heart rescuers. They had taken Chance, nursed him back to health, and in doing so, had planted the seeds of rebellion. Vincent's eyes narrowed as he contemplated this new threat. He had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let a bunch of animal lovers bring down his empire. He would crush them, just as he had crushed all who had stood in his way before. But first, he needed to send a message. And what better way to do that than to reclaim what was rightfully his? A plan began to form in Vincent's mind, a twisted web of violence and retribution. He would take back Chance, make an example of him for all to see. He would show the world that no one, not even the most resilient of spirits, could defy Vincent Crowley and live. With a final, menacing chuckle, Vincent rose from his seat, his eyes glinting with malice in the dim light. The game was on, and he played to win. In the bright, sterile confines of the veterinary clinic, Chance lay on a soft bed, his battered body swathed in bandages and his mind lost in a haze of pain and confusion. He had never known kindness like this, never felt gentle hands soothing his hurts and coaxing him back from the brink. As the days turned into weeks, Chance began to heal, not just in body but in spirit. Emily was a constant presence at his side, her soft voice and tender touch a balm to his wounded soul. She spoke to him of hope, of a future free from pain and fear, and slowly, tentatively, Chance began to believe. Sarah, too, was a frequent visitor, her fierce determination tempered by a deep well of compassion. She would sit with Chance for hours, reading to him from books of poetry and adventure, spinning tales of courage and resilience that stirred something deep within his battered heart. Gradually, Chance began to come out of his shell, his tail wagging tentatively at the sound of friendly voices and his eyes shining with a new light. He learned to trust again, to open his heart to the possibility of love and belonging. But even as Chance healed, Emily and Sarah knew that their work was far from over. The scars on his body told a story of unspeakable cruelty, of a shadowy underworld where dogs like him were treated as nothing more than disposable commodities. They had heard the whispers, the tales of Vincent Crowley and his reign of terror. They knew that Chance was just the tip of the iceberg, one small piece of a much larger puzzle. And so, even as they cherished every moment of Chance's recovery, Emily and Sarah began to plan. They reached out to their network of allies, fellow rescuers, animal rights activists, and concerned citizens, and slowly, a coalition began to take shape. They knew that they were up against a formidable foe, a man who would stop at nothing to protect his twisted empire. But they also knew that they had something Vincent could never understand, the power of love, the strength of a community united in common cause. As Chance took his first tentative steps on his newly healed legs, Emily and Sarah watched with tears in their eyes, their hearts swelling with pride and determination. They had saved one life, but they knew that their true battle was just beginning. For in the fight against cruelty and injustice, every small victory mattered. And with Chance by their side, a living symbol of hope and resilience, they knew that anything was possible. As Chance continued to recover under Emily and Sarah's loving care, the paws of hope team threw themselves into the daunting task of unraveling Vincent Crowley's criminal empire. They pored over every scrap of evidence, every whispered rumor, piecing together a picture of a vast network of suffering and exploitation. But even as they made progress, the challenges they faced seemed insurmountable. Vincent was a master of his craft, adept at covering his tracks and intimidating potential witnesses into silence. Every lead they chased seemed to dead end, every door they knocked on slammed shut in their faces. Frustration and exhaustion began to take their toll, fraying tempers and testing the limits of even the most dedicated volunteers. But through it all, Emily and Sarah remained steadfast, their resolve only strengthened by the knowledge of the lives that hung in the balance. And then, just as despair began to set in, a breakthrough, a former associate of Vincent's, a man who had once been complicit in his crimes, but who had since seen the error of his ways. He came to them in the dead of night, his face etched with fear and remorse, and poured out a tale of horror that left them shaken to their core. There were dozens of dogs, he told them, hidden away in a network of abandoned buildings and underground fighting pits scattered throughout the city. They were kept in deplorable conditions, starved and beaten and forced to fight for their lives in the name of entertainment and profit. The Paws of Hope team listened in growing horror, their hearts breaking for the innocent lives that had been so cruelly exploited. But even in the face of such overwhelming darkness, they knew that they could not turn away. They began to plan, to strategize, to rally the support of the community they had worked so hard to build. They reached out to law enforcement, to the media, to anyone who would listen, determined to shine a light on the suffering that had gone unseen for too long. And through it all, Chance was there, a living testament to the power of resilience and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. His presence was a constant reminder of what they were fighting for, of the countless lives that depended on their success. As the pieces began to fall into place, as the tide began to turn against Vincent and his empire of cruelty, Emily and Sarah knew that they were on the cusp of something extraordinary. They had started with a single life, a single act of compassion, but they had set in motion a chain reaction of hope and change that would ripple out across the city and beyond. And so, with Chance by their side and an army of allies at their back, they prepared to take the fight to Vincent, to end his reign of terror once and for all. The road ahead would be long and perilous, but they knew that they could not falter, not when so much was at stake. For in the battle against cruelty, every life mattered, every act of kindness a victory in its own right. And with each passing day, each small triumph, they knew that they were one step closer to a world where no animal would ever suffer at the hands of human cruelty again. As the Paws of Hope team delved deeper into their investigation, they began to uncover a web of corruption and complicity that extended far beyond Vincent Crowley's criminal enterprise. Local officials, law enforcement officers, even prominent businessmen all seemed to have a hand in perpetuating the cruel bloodsport that had claimed so many innocent lives. The task before them seemed more daunting than ever, the opposition more entrenched and powerful than they could have imagined. But even in the face of such overwhelming odds, Emily and Sarah refused to back down. They worked tirelessly, building alliances, gathering evidence, and chipping away at the wall of silence that had protected Vincent and his cronies for so long. They faced threats, intimidation, even physical violence, but they persevered, fueled by the knowledge that every day they delayed was another day that innocent animals suffered. And through it all, the community rallied around them, a groundswell of support and outrage that could not be ignored. Ordinary citizens, moved by the story of Chance's resilience and the tireless efforts of the Paws of Hope team, began to speak out, to demand action from their elected officials and to take a stand against the cruelty in their midst. It was a slow, painful process, marked by setbacks and disappointments, but gradually, inexorably, the tide began to turn. Whispers became shouts, secrets became headlines, and the once untouchable Vincent Crowley found himself facing a reckoning he could never have imagined. And at the center of it all was Chance, the dog who had started it all, who had survived against all odds and inspired a movement that would change the city forever. He had come so far from the broken, beaten creature they had found in that alleyway, his body healed and his spirit restored by the love and devotion of his rescuers. Now, as he stood proud and tall by Emily's side, a living symbol of hope and redemption, it was clear that his story was far from over. He had a purpose now, a mission that went beyond his own survival to be a voice for the voiceless, a champion for the forgotten and abused. And as the Paws of Hope team pressed on, as they chipped away at the wall of silence and corruption brick by brick, they knew that they were not alone. They had Chance, they had each other, and they had a community that had awoken to the power of compassion and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. The road ahead was still long, the challenges still great, but they faced them with a renewed sense of purpose and a steadfast determination to see justice done. For in the fight against cruelty, every victory mattered, every life saved, a testament to the power of hope and the enduring strength of the human spirit. As the net began to close around Vincent Crowley and his criminal empire, the Paws of Hope team knew that they had to act fast. Every day that passed was another day that innocent dogs suffered, another day that the cycle of violence and cruelty continued unchecked. With a renewed sense of urgency, they redoubled their efforts, working around the clock to gather the evidence they needed to bring Vincent to justice. They combed through financial records, interviewed witnesses, and pieced together a damning portrait of a man who had built his fortune on the suffering of the most vulnerable creatures. But even as they made progress, the danger they faced grew more acute. Vincent, sensing the walls closing in around him, lashed out with all the fury and desperation of a cornered animal. He sent his thugs to intimidate witnesses, to vandalize the Paws of Hope shelter, to make it clear that he would stop at nothing to protect his empire. Emily and Sarah found themselves the targets of an increasingly vicious campaign of harassment and threats, their every move watched and their every word scrutinized. But they refused to be cowed, refused to let fear and intimidation deter them from their mission. They drew strength from each other, from the unwavering support of their volunteers and the community that had rallied around them. And they drew strength from Chance, the dog who had become the beating heart of their movement, the living embodiment of everything they were fighting for. Chance had come so far since those early days, his once broken body now strong and healthy, his spirit unbowed by the cruelty he had endured. He had become a beacon of hope for the countless other dogs who still suffered in silence, a reminder that no matter how dire the circumstances, there was always a chance for redemption and a better life. And so, even as the danger mounted and the obstacles seemed insurmountable, the Paws of Hope team pressed on, driven by the knowledge that they were fighting for something bigger than themselves. As the evidence against Vincent Crowley mounted, the Paws of Hope team knew they were getting close to a breakthrough. But with each step forward, the danger grew more palpable, the threats more ominous. It was during one of their late-night strategy sessions that the unthinkable happened. As Emily and Sarah pored over documents and planned their next move, the sound of shattering glass tore through the silence. In an instant, the room was plunged into darkness, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. Disoriented and choking, Emily and Sarah stumbled toward the exit, only to find their path blocked by the menacing figures of Vincent's thugs. They had been found out, their sanctuary violated, and now they faced the very real possibility that they might not make it out alive. But even in that moment of terror, they refused to give in to despair. With a courage born of desperation, they fought back, using every ounce of strength and determination they possessed to battle their way to safety. And then, just when all seemed lost, help arrived from the most unexpected of places. Chance, the dog who had been their constant companion and inspiration throughout the long months of their investigation, leapt into action, his powerful jaws and fierce loyalty turning the tide against their attackers. It was a moment of pure, instinctive heroism, a testament to the unbreakable bond between human and animal. And as Emily and Sarah emerged from the smoking ruins of their shelter, battered but unbroken, they knew that they had been given a second chance, a renewed sense of purpose and determination. The attack had been a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the lengths to which Vincent and his cronies would go to protect their criminal enterprise. But it had also been a rallying cry, a call to action that would galvanize the community and bring new allies to their cause. In the days and weeks that followed, the Paws of Hope team redoubled their efforts, working tirelessly to build an airtight case against Vincent and his accomplices. They reached out to the media, to lawmakers and advocates, anyone who would listen and help them shine a light on the dark underbelly of the city's animal fighting scene. And through it all, Chance was there, a constant reminder of what they were fighting for, of the countless lives that hung in the balance. His story had become a symbol of hope and resilience, a beacon of light in a world too often shrouded in darkness and despair. As the pressure mounted and the evidence piled up, Vincent Crowley began to feel the walls closing in around him. He lashed out with ever greater violence and desperation, but it was a losing battle, a last, futile stand against the forces of justice and compassion. And so, with the final pieces falling into place and the net tightening around Vincent and his empire of cruelty, the stage was set for a confrontation that would decide the fate of not just one dog, but of an entire city's soul. The day of reckoning arrived on a crisp, clear morning, the sun rising over the city like a herald of hope and new beginnings. For Emily, Sarah, and the entire Paws of Hope team, it was a moment they had been working towards for months, a chance to finally bring Vincent Crowley to justice and put an end to his reign of terror. They gathered outside the courthouse, a sea of determined faces and resolute spirits, ready to bear witness to the culmination of their tireless efforts. And there, at the center of it all, was Chance, his presence a powerful reminder of everything they had fought for and everything they had endured along the way. As Vincent was led into the courtroom, his once arrogant demeanor replaced by a sullen, defeated air, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the moment when the truth would finally be laid bare and the guilty would be held accountable. The trial that followed was a grueling, emotional affair, a roller coaster of testimony and revelation that laid bare the depths of Vincent's depravity and the scale of his criminal enterprise. Witnesses took the stand, their voices trembling but unwavering as they recounted the horrors they had seen and the suffering they had endured. Through it all, Emily and Sarah sat in the front row, their hands clasped tightly together, their eyes fixed on the proceedings with a fierce intensity. They had poured their hearts and souls into this fight, had sacrificed so much to see justice done, and now, at last, they were on the brink of victory. But even as the evidence mounted and the verdict seemed all but certain, Vincent had one last card to play. In a desperate bid to save himself, he turned on his accomplices, naming names and pointing fingers in a frenzied attempt to shift blame and sow chaos. For a moment, it seemed as though his gambit might succeed, as the courtroom erupted into a frenzy of shouted accusations and bitter recriminations. But Emily and Sarah held fast, their faith in the strength of their case and the power of the truth unwavering. And in the end, it was that truth that carried the day. As the verdict was read out, a collective gasp rose from the assembled crowd, a moment of stunned disbelief giving way to a surge of jubilation and relief. Guilty. On all counts. Vincent Crowley, the mastermind behind the city's most notorious dogfighting ring, was going to prison for a very long time. As the courtroom erupted into a chaos of emotion and celebration, Emily and Sarah embraced, tears streaming down their faces as they savored the bittersweet taste of victory. They had done it. Against all odds, they had brought a monster to justice and given voice to the voiceless. But even in that moment of triumph, they knew that their work was far from over. There were still dogs out there suffering, still countless lives waiting to be saved. And with Chance by their side, a living symbol of hope and redemption, they knew that they would never stop fighting, never stop working to build a world where every animal was cherished and protected. In the wake of Vincent Crowley's conviction, the city seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The dark shadow that had hung over its animal welfare community for so long had finally been lifted, and a new sense of hope and possibility had taken its place. For Emily, Sarah, and the Paws of Hope team, the victory was a vindication of everything they had fought for, a testament to the power of perseverance and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. But it was also a sobering reminder of the work that still lay ahead, of the countless lives that still hung in the balance. With renewed determination, they threw themselves into the task of rebuilding, of picking up the pieces of the shattered lives left in Vincent's wake. They worked tirelessly to rehabilitate the dogs that had been rescued from his fighting pits, to find them loving homes and give them the second chance they so desperately deserved. And through it all, Chance was there, a constant reminder of the transformative power of love and compassion. He had come so far from the broken, battered creature they had found in that alleyway, his body and spirit healed by the unwavering devotion of his rescuers. Now, as he bounded through the halls of the Paws of Hope shelter, his tail wagging and his eyes shining with joy, he seemed to embody the very essence of resilience and hope. He was a symbol of everything they had achieved and everything they still aspired to be. But even as they celebrated their hard-won victories, Emily and Sarah knew that the fight was far from over. The conviction of Vincent Crowley was a major blow to the city's dogfighting underworld, but it was only the beginning of a much larger battle. There were still other players out there, other criminals who saw animals as nothing more than commodities to be exploited for profit and pleasure. And as long as that mindset persisted, as long as there were those who would seek to perpetuate the cycle of violence and cruelty, the work of Paws of Hope would never be done. But they were ready for the challenge, ready to continue the fight for as long as it took. They had seen the worst of humanity, had stared into the abyss of cruelty and suffering, and had emerged stronger and more determined than ever. And so, with chance by their side and an army of supporters at their back, they pressed on, secure in the knowledge that every life saved, every act of kindness and compassion, was a victory in its own right. They were the guardians of the voiceless, the champions of the forgotten and abused, and they would never rest until every animal was safe, loved, and protected. Months turned into years, and the city began to change, slowly but surely, in ways both big and small. The conviction of Vincent Crowley and the exposure of his criminal empire had been a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the cruelty and suffering that had gone unchecked for too long. But it had also been a catalyst, a spark that had ignited a movement of compassion and change. Across the city, people began to take notice, to pay attention to the plight of the animals in their midst. They volunteered at shelters, donated to rescue organizations, and spoke out against the injustices they saw. And at the forefront of it all was Paws of Hope, the little organization that had started with a single act of kindness and grown into a force for good that stretched across the city and beyond. Under Emily and Sarah's leadership, they had become a beacon of hope, a shining example of what was possible when people came together in the name of a common cause. They had expanded their operations, opening new shelters and sanctuaries, reaching out to communities that had long been overlooked and underserved. They had forged partnerships with law enforcement and lawmakers, working to strengthen animal welfare laws and hold those who violated them accountable. And through it all, they had never lost sight of their original mission, of the simple but profound truth that had guided them from the very beginning, that every life mattered, that every creature deserved to be loved and protected. For Chance, the journey had been a long and winding one, a path marked by pain and suffering, but also by hope and redemption. He had found a home with Emily, had become a beloved member of the Paws of Hope family, and had touched countless lives along the way. Now, as he padded through the halls of the shelter, his graying muzzle and stiff joints a testament to the passage of time, he seemed to embody the very spirit of resilience and grace. He had been through hell and back, had endured more than any creature should ever have to, but he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more loving than ever. And as Emily watched him, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude, she knew that he was more than just a dog, more than just a symbol of hope and healing. He was a reminder of the power of second chances, of the incredible capacity for love and forgiveness that existed within every living being. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, had battled the forces of cruelty and emerged victorious. And though the road ahead was still long and the challenges still great, they knew that they would face them together, side by side, united in their unwavering commitment to the cause of compassion. For in the end, that was what it was all about, the simple, profound act of opening one's heart to another, of extending a hand in kindness and understanding. It was the very essence of what made them human, and what gave them the strength to keep fighting, no matter the odds. And so, with Chance by their side and a world of possibility stretching out before them, Emily and Sarah pressed on, secure in the knowledge that, together, there was nothing they could not achieve. They were the guardians of the voiceless, the champions of the forgotten and abused, and they would never rest until every creature, great and small, was safe, loved, and free. Years passed, and the city continued to evolve, shaped by the tireless efforts of those who had dedicated their lives to the cause of animal welfare. The once thriving dogfighting underworld had been all but eradicated, driven underground by the relentless pursuit of justice and the growing awareness of the public. But even as they celebrated their victories, Emily and Sarah knew that their work was never truly done. There were always new challenges to face, new frontiers to explore in the never-ending battle against cruelty and neglect. And so they pressed on, driven by the same fierce determination that had guided them from the very beginning. They expanded their outreach programs, working to educate communities about the importance of responsible pet ownership and the joy that came from opening one's heart to an animal in need. They lobbied for stronger laws and harsher penalties for those who would seek to exploit and abuse the innocent, and they worked tirelessly to build a network of support and resources for those on the front lines of the fight. And through it all, Chance remained a constant presence, a living embodiment of the transformative power of love and compassion. Though his muzzle had grown gray and his steps had slowed, his spirit remained as vibrant and indomitable as ever. He had become a fixture at the Paws of Hope shelter, a gentle giant who welcomed every new arrival with a wagging tail and a nuzzle of encouragement. He seemed to understand, on some deep, instinctive level, the pain and trauma that each of these creatures had endured, and he made it his mission to show them that there was still goodness in the world, still hope for a better tomorrow. And as Emily watched him work his magic, watched the fear and mistrust melt away from the eyes of even the most damaged and traumatized animals, she knew that he was more than just a dog, more than just a mascot for their cause. He was a healer, a bridge between the broken and the whole, a living testament to the resilience of the spirit and the boundless capacity of the heart. And in his presence, she found a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper understanding of the true meaning of her life's work. For Chance had taught her, more than anyone or anything else, that every moment was precious, every connection a gift to be cherished. He had shown her the power of forgiveness, the strength that came from opening oneself up to the possibility of love, even in the face of unimaginable pain and suffering. And so, as she looked out over the bustling shelter, at the countless lives that had been touched by the work of Paws of Hope, she felt a sense of profound gratitude and awe. They had come so far, had achieved so much, but there was still so much more to be done, still so many lives waiting to be saved. But she knew, with a certainty that came from the depths of her soul, that they would never stop fighting, never stop working to build a world where every creature was cherished and protected. They were the guardians of the innocent, the champions of the lost and forgotten, and they would never rest until every heart was whole, every spirit unbroken. And with Chance by their side, a living symbol of hope and redemption, they knew that anything was possible, that no challenge was too great, no obstacle too daunting. Together, they would face the future with courage and compassion, secure in the knowledge that, in the end, love would always triumph, and the soul would always find its way home. As the years passed and the city continued to change, Emily and Sarah found themselves reflecting more and more on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They had seen so much, had endured so much, but through it all, they had never lost sight of the simple, powerful truth that had guided them from the very beginning. They had learned, through trial and error, through heartbreak and triumph, that the fight for animal welfare was not a sprint, but a marathon. It required patience, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to the cause, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. And they had learned, too, that the fight was not one that could be won alone. It required the support and dedication of an entire community, a network of individuals and organizations working together towards a common goal. And so they had worked to build that community, to forge connections and partnerships that stretched across the city and beyond. They had reached out to schools and churches, to businesses and civic groups, anyone and everyone who shared their passion for the welfare of animals. And slowly but surely, they had seen the fruits of their labors begin to take root. More and more people were getting involved, volunteering their time and resources to support the work of Paws of Hope. More and more animals were finding loving homes, were being given the second chance they so desperately deserved. But even as they celebrated these victories, Emily and Sarah knew that there was still so much more to be done. The fight against cruelty and neglect was ongoing, a constant battle that required vigilance and dedication. And so they pressed on, driven by the same fierce determination that had guided them from the very beginning. They expanded their programs, working to provide education and resources to underserved communities, to reach out to those who might not otherwise have access to the support and care they needed. They continued to lobby for stronger laws and harsher penalties, working to hold those who would seek to harm animals accountable for their actions. And they never lost sight of the individual lives that hung in the balance, the countless creatures who depended on them for their very survival. Through it all, Chance remained a constant presence, a reminder of the incredible resilience and capacity for love that existed within every living being. Though his body had grown frail with age, his spirit remained as strong and vibrant as ever, a beacon of hope and inspiration to all who knew him. And as Emily and Sarah looked back on the long, winding road that had brought them to this moment, they knew that they had been blessed beyond measure. They had found their calling, had discovered the true meaning and purpose of their lives. And they had learned. As the sun began to set on another day at the Paws of Hope shelter, Emily found herself sitting quietly beside Chance, her hand resting gently on his graying head. The old dog leaned into her touch, his eyes closing in contentment as he savored the simple, perfect moment. Around them, the shelter was alive with activity, volunteers and staff moving about their daily routines with a sense of purpose and joy. The sound of barking dogs and meowing kittens filled the air, a cacophony of life and energy that never failed to lift Emily's spirits. But even amidst the chaos and the noise, Emily found herself lost in thought, reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. She thought of all the challenges they had faced, all the obstacles they had overcome, and all the lives they had touched along the way. She thought of Vincent Crowley, the man who had once seemed like an unstoppable force of evil, but who now sat behind bars, his empire of cruelty reduced to ashes and dust. She thought of the countless dogs they had rescued from his clutches, the broken and battered creatures who had found healing and hope in the loving embrace of Paws of Hope.